everybody. I'm Steve Green. This is Trifecta. And, I didn't know whether to introduce this story by saying, stop making sense, or by saying, oops, they did it again. So before I think of another musical reference, let's bring on Bill Whittle and Scott Ott so I can tell you and them all about this week's story. Newsweek, just out on Sunday, has a cover story by the lovely and very, very brave Ayaan Hirsi Ali called Muslim Rage and the Last Gasp of Radical Islam. Bill, you just did a Trifecta segment a couple of weeks ago when Newsweek put Niall Ferguson on the cover, telling Obama it was time to leave the White House. This is two great covers in the last 3 or 4 weeks. What's going on at Newsweek?
You've heard the expression a deathbed conversion, right? Where somebody who's been rampant atheist their entire life is now faced with the fact that, within the next hour or so, they're going to be checking out and shuffling off this mortal coil. And all of a sudden, all the things they used to sneer at from the comfort of their comfort is not so sneerable anymore. And they start hedging their bets and they start thinking about the consequences. And, when Newsweek was sold for $1, a little while ago, everybody said they thought that, somebody overpaid for that magazine. They were talking about canceling the print version of Newsweek, which leaves essentially nothing. And I genuinely think what happened was, since they were probably weeks away from closing the print version of the magazine, they just decided, what the heck, let's see if we can put a little balance into this partisan rag that I used to read quite a lot in the 80s. Pretty much I read every week in the 80s and 90s before it became what it was. And I've heard anecdotally that the Hit the Road Barack cover that we just mentioned actually sold some copies. And it's entirely possible that when you're in that kind of a desperate situation, when you really genuinely are about to go under, the fact that you're selling magazines someplace may be enough to actually penetrate your ideology. Stranger things have happened, I guess.
Well, if you're right, I don't know which part makes me happier, that they're converting or that they're on their deathbed. It's all full of win.
It's a win-win.
Right, Scott, just a couple of years ago, Newsweek was bought, as Bill mentioned, for $1 by liberal businessman Sidney Harmon. But after his death last year, the family severed connections with the magazine. So could we be looking at a real return to value, maybe a $1.25, $1.30 for this operation?
Well, I think we could be, but I think we're also looking at the possibility that they just didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they might have been incompetent, because what do they have? They have an author here, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who came through Europe from Africa, who's an atheist. And so I don't know if they actually read the piece or just published it. She's awfully pretty. And so it could be that they just didn't know what they had their hands on. But I just got done reading Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book, Nomad. It's the sequel to her book, Infidel. And she is an amazing character because she is an atheist. But she says, look, if we're going to deal with the Islamic threat today in the United States, the Christian church needs to stop doing this ecumenical faith conversation thing and start leading people to Jesus. These people need a redemptive God, she says, the atheist says.
All right. Bill, I want to get into the content of Ali's article because it's really stunning stuff, especially coming from Newsweek. I'm used to this from her. I've been reading for her for a number of years, but this is Newsweek. She writes, and this is a quote, "The riots in Muslim countries and the so-called demonstrations by some Muslims in Western countries that invariably accompany such provocations, like the movie, have the appearance of spontaneity, but they are often carefully planned in advance." Bill? That's not the story UN Ambassador Susan Rice was telling us all weekend. Who should we believe?
They're associated with the Obama administration at this point. I think you can pretty safely discount the fact that there's any kernel of truth in anything that they're saying. My Trifecta this week is all about this issue, obviously, about whether the movie triggered this thing or not, and it clearly didn't. That movie had been on YouTube for a month or two prior to the uprisings. We know that the coordinated attacks in Benghazi were internally coordinated. We know that these uprisings all took place on the anniversary of 9/11. So, of course, it's not about the movie. Of course, the movie is just the fig leaf that they use. But this woman has such courage. Now, I find it interesting that a person whose life is endangered, who's really under threat of death pretty much every day of her life, has the courage to come out and defend Western values and Christianity. And then the President of the United States, who has the most advanced security force on the face of the planet, is the first person in the country to hand over that one sacred, precious freedom, which is the right to speak your mind without consequences, to these 7th century savages. And, you know, this world doesn't get any stranger than this.
It sure doesn't. You know, she escaped from Somalia, ended up in Holland, where she got chased out after her own government that she was a member of refused to provide her any protection. All right, Scott, you know, you look at Fox News, #1 on the ratings. They make money hand over fist. You look at a liberal rag like Newsweek that is on the verge of death, but now is actually selling magazines by putting on cover stories that are friendly to conservatives and real-world messages. Is there a greater lesson in all this?
Well, and I wouldn't even say friendly to conservatives. I would just say that it's more American. It's more American to look at the world and the news through the glasses of normal Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, conservatives, or even sort of, you know, centrist liberals. Most people aren't looking for an excuse to hate the United States when they wake up in the morning. They feel that God has blessed America. They're glad they woke up here this morning. They're glad they have an opportunity to live here. And when they read a newspaper or magazine, they don't want to have nonstop attacks against what is in essence their family, their brand, their way of life. And so I think Newsweek may be onto something here. And I'll tell you what, they will follow the sales chart in the editorial department.
Well, we can only hope so. Buy this week's issue. Encourage the good behavior. You know, folks, it's pretty clear, at least to me, that Newsweek is looking to take a new direction. Maybe not fair, maybe not balanced, but certainly better. And I say that because of an old military expression that I'm going to have to paraphrase to make sense here. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is competence? Maybe. For PJTV, I'm Steve Green.